They said it was just another episode. That's what the manager whispered to the server when the man started shaking at table 6. Probably one of those PTSD types, he muttered, half laughing as the group at table 7 mounted seizure spasms and clinked their glasses together. No one helped. Not the waiter who stood frozen with a tray of waters, not the hostess who pretended to check her tablet, and certainly not the table of adults cackling like hyenas, pointing at the man trying to breathe. He was hunched forward now, shoulders locked, his kids, one boy, one girl, on either side of him, whispering, "It's okay, Daddy, it's okay," like they'd rehearsed this scene a dozen times. The restaurant smelled like grilled onions and bourbon barbecue, but all he could smell was diesel, sweat, and the sterile burn of adrenaline. Outside, it was just another sunny Saturday in Westfield, Missouri. Inside, it was his battlefield. His fingers gripped the edge of the table like it was a lifeline. And just above his clenched fists, half covered by his jacket sleeve, sat an old tattoo, faded but unmistakable, the emblem of the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. But no one saw it. No one cared. Not until the woman at the bar stood up. If you agree no veteran should ever be mocked for what they carry home, like and subscribe, because this isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. She didn't storm over. She didn't shout. She simply walked, slow and measured, to where the kids were holding their father's hands, and knelt beside them like she'd known them forever. She whispered something we couldn't hear, but both kids nodded. One of them, the little girl, gripped the woman's wrist and didn't let go. The woman turned then, faced the laughing table, and said one sentence that split the restaurant in half. "He's braver in this panic than you've ever been sober." And then she placed her hand on his shoulder. "Breathe, Sergeant. I've got you." You should have seen the way their laughter died. That smug alpha type with the backwards cap suddenly couldn't make eye contact. The woman waved someone over, not a server. A man in plain clothes but military posture. Turns out, the vet's alert tag had activated from his watch. Quiet signal. Low profile system. It pinged support. And support had arrived. 2 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked a man who didn't need to announce his rank. You could tell from the way he looked at the room like it was an assessment. The mocking table froze. The vet was now sitting upright, still shaking, but focused on the kids, on the woman, on the man who had just entered, and nodded at him like they'd once faced fire together. The kids were crying now, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. The entire restaurant went silent except for a child's voice saying, "That's my dad." He was in a war. And for the first time since it started, someone behind the counter whispered, "He's a Marine," like it meant something again. It did. The man who entered said nothing to the group who laughed, only showed a phone, an image of the vet in uniform, medals across his chest, a flag behind him. He turned to Scree. "Laugh now," he said. No one did. Because sometimes the battlefield isn't in a desert. Sometimes it's a restaurant in Missouri, and the enemy is silence, ignorance, and laughter. And sometimes, the bravest thing a Marine does isn't taking fire. It's surviving long enough to get mocked by strangers while keeping his kids calm through a flashback. Later, when it was all over, and the vet was sitting with his kids eating a second round of fries, someone slid a folded napkin onto the table. Written on it, in tight black ink, were 5 words, "You still saved them today." He never found out who wrote it. But that woman who knelt beside his kids? She didn't stay long. She left before the check even came, but the girl turned to her mom and said, she looked like someone who knows war, too. And maybe that's true. Because the people who've seen it, they don't always raise their voices. Sometimes, they just stand up. And when they do, the world changes. Even if only for one man, one meal, and one moment that reminded everyone watching what courage really looks like. The thing about trauma is, it doesn't follow polite schedules. It doesn't wait for your kids to be grown, or your burger to finish grilling. It just shows up, like thunder out of nowhere, and turns a quiet Saturday into a survival exercise. And for Marcus Dean, that thunder had come in the form of crashing cutlery, a pop speaker overhead, and laughter that wasn't just cruel, it was dismissive. But this isn't a story about Marcus falling apart. This is a story about what happens when someone decides you're worth standing up for. The restaurant had returned to a hush after the woman, Jordan, spoke. People didn't resume eating. Forks were halfway to mouths and never landed. Some stared at their plates like the food had gone cold in seconds. And that smug guy with the backwards cap, the one who laughed the loudest? He was frozen, jaw clenched, looking like he was about to make the world's worst decision, talking back. But Jordan didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice. She just stood in front of Marcus and his kids like a human barricade, one hand still on the little girl's shoulder, the other on Marcus's. It was as if she'd drawn a silent line in the linoleum and dared anyone to cross it. Marcus was still trembling, his jaw tight, his eyes somewhere between the present and some faraway checkpoint in Afghanistan. But his breathing had started to slow. Jordan's voice was low, even. "Come back now, Sergeant. We're not under fire. Your kids are safe." The little boy, brave and still holding his dad's hand, whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. You're with us." That's what cracked Marcus open. Not the noise. Not the stares. Not even the humiliation. It was the reminder that he was here. With them. His eyes, red-rimmed and wet, finally met Jordan's. And in that glance was recognition. Not of her name. Not her face. But of her bearing. Her posture. Her tone. She had the look. The kind of calm only carved by chaos. "You served?" he asked, voice rough. Jordan gave a small nod. "Intel. 3 tours. Army. You." "Marine," Marcus said, breath catching. "Forward ops. Sajin." Jordan didn't ask anything more. She just nodded. Because that was enough. But the group at the next table, they weren't finished yet. Because cowards never know when to shut up. "Jesus," one of them muttered. "It was just a joke. We didn't know he was gonna go full Saving Private Ryan on us." Another chuckled, trying to defuse tension with idiocy. "Yeah, man. Nobody said thank you for your service, my bad." That's when Jordan straightened her shoulders. And this time, it wasn't quiet. "You want to joke about war?" she said, her voice slicing the air. "Tell that to the 7 people in our unit who never came home. Tell it to the kids here, who just watched their dad relive the worst moment of his life over a drop tray." Silence again. This time, it was a shamed silence. Except one guy tried to scoff, still hiding behind bravado. Whatever. He shouldn't be out in public if he can't handle noise. That was when the door opened. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. A man in civilian clothes walked in, mid-50s, broad frame, silver crew cut, and posture like steel. His jacket bore the faint outline of a badge underneath, but his walk said military long before that. He scanned the room. Saw Jordan. Saw Marcus. Saw the kids. Walked straight over. Jordan nodded to him. "Back up," she said. Marcus blinked in confusion. "I didn't call. Your alert tag dead," the man said. "Biometric ping went out when your heart rate spiked. You're registered through the VA Rapid Response Net." "Smart move." Marcus looked down at the tan strap around his wrist. He'd forgotten all about it. Bought it for peace of mind. Never thought it would actually activate. The man turned to the kids. "You two did very well. Textbook calm. Your dad's trained you." The girl looked up at him. "Are you here to take him away?" she asked, her voice so small it shattered the room's last reserve. The man knelt to her level. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "We're just here to make sure he's okay. Your dad's a hero. Today too." And then, almost as an afterthought, he turned to the group at the next table, the ones who had fallen suspiciously quiet. "I'll need your names," he said, flatly. "All of you." The one in the cap tried to laugh it off. "What for?" The man raised an eyebrow. "Because you mocked a federally registered disabled veteran in a public place during a recognized medical episode. And because 3 of you are wearing employee badges for Apex Solutions Defense Contracting, and Apex has a zero-tolerance clause about public conduct toward veterans and service members." The badges came off faster than napkins. The laughter was done. Jordan spoke again. "We're not here for revenge. We're here for accountability. And education. You laughed because you saw weakness. But that man survived things your generation turns into memes." The VA rep stepped in. "You'll be contacted by HR. Cooperate. Or don't." But Apex already has the footage. One of the men stood up, trying to save face. We didn't know he was a veteran. We thought he was just some twitchy guy. Marcus, who hadn't spoken for several minutes, finally found his voice. I'm a twitchy guy, he said. And I'm a veteran. And a dad. And a human being. And for the first time, his voice didn't shake. The group filed out under a storm cloud of stares. No shouting. No threats. Just the kind of quiet that follows shame. The rest of the restaurant slowly returned to life. Someone in the corner clapped once. Not for show. Just acknowledgement. But no one followed suit. This wasn't that kind of moment. Marcus and his kids finished their meal. Quietly. The VA rep stayed, just in case. Jordan didn't. She stood, adjusted her jacket, and began to walk out. Wait, Marcus said. She paused. Thank you, he said. You didn't have to. She turned back, just once. Yeah, she replied. But we're not supposed to stop showing up when the uniform comes off. She left before he could say anything more. Later, when Marcus buckled his kids into the car, he found something tucked into the restaurant check folio. A note, scribbled on a server pad. For words, you were seen today. No name. No number. Just that. It hit harder than a metal. At home, the kids went to bed early. Marcus sat on the porch, a blanket over his shoulders, staring at the stars. He reached for his old phone. Found the photo from a decade ago, his unit, shoulder to shoulder, dust in their boots, fire in their eyes. He zoomed in on one face, his own. Before the tremors. Before the panic. Before the world decided he was broken. He thought of Jordan. Of the stranger who saw him when it felt like no one ever would again. Of the daughter who didn't flinch. Of the son who had held his hand like it was gospel. He whispered a sentence he hadn't said in years. Still here. And somewhere out there, he knew she'd understand. It started with a photo. Just one. A server named Kayla had quietly taken it during the incident. Not of the laughing men, not of the confrontation, but of the moment the little girl held her father's hand while a stranger shielded them with her body. No faces. Just posture. Emotion. The unmistakable image of quiet courage. She posted it to her private Instagram with the caption, "This man didn't collapse. He protected his kids through a storm we couldn't see." And someone stood up when it counted. She added 2 hashtags, #PTSD is real and #honor at home. By morning, the post had 14,000 likes. By noon, over 1.2 million. And by that evening, national outlets were calling it the restaurant reckoning. Marcus Dean had no idea any of this was happening. He wasn't on Instagram. He wasn't trending. He was just trying to take his kids to the library the next day without sweating through a shirt. The VA had followed up that morning. They sent a counselor, a trauma-informed caseworker, and, unexpectedly, a bouquet of white lilies from a retired colonel who left no name, only a note. I had an episode in 2009. Mine was on a plane. You survived yours with grace. But the world had already shifted. By the time Jordan saw the post, it had been reshared by 3 senators, 1 4-star general, and a Navy Widows Foundation. She didn't like the spotlight. Never had. But when a reporter showed up at her door, well-researched, polite, and respectful, she didn't slam it. She said, "I'll talk. But only if the story stays about him." And to her surprise, they agreed. 2 days later, the VA media office contacted Marcus. They asked for permission to share the photo, now circulating in veteran forums with comments like, "This is why I don't eat in public," and "He held it together better than most of us could." Marcus wasn't sure. He wasn't proud of what happened. But his daughter, who had said little since, sat beside him, took his hand, and whispered, "Maybe if people see you, they'll understand people like you." He gave his permission. Within 48 hours, every major network was talking about it. Not with fanfare, not with politics, but with questions. Hard ones. About veterans with invisible wounds, about children forced to be emotional first responders, about the line between ignorance and cruelty. And across the country, people began to respond. A diner in Pennsylvania posted a new sign by their front counter. "Veterans eat free. We train our staff to treat invisible wounds with respect." A chain restaurant in California offered trauma-informed hospitality training to its employees, citing the incident as a teachable moment. And Apex Solutions, the defense contractor whose employees had laughed the loudest, issued a press statement confirming the immediate termination of 3 staff members for conduct violations. They didn't use names, but the internet had already identified them. One had been on track for promotion. Another had a public-facing contract with the DoD. They were all gone by Friday. But this story wasn't about punishments. It was about presence. It was about the fact that Marcus Dean, a man who once believed his uniform had expired along with his usefulness, had become the face of survival with dignity, not because he wanted it, but because someone else refused to let his pain go unseen. The following week, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs asked if Marcus would be willing to appear at a small roundtable discussion in D.C. The topic? How to build better community response systems for veterans in crisis. Marcus didn't know what to say, but his kids did. His son said, "Dad, maybe other dads like you won't feel alone if you go." He went. He wore a simple charcoal blazer over a dress shirt that still felt stiff from the cleaners. His daughter helped him adjust the cuffs. And when he walked into that federal room, quiet, humble, steady, he did not shake. He told them exactly what he remembered: the feel of his daughter's grip, the roar of invisible fire in his ears, the cruel smirks that followed him into panic. And he said one sentence that stopped the room. "I wasn't weak. I was overwhelmed." "That's not the same thing." Someone at the table teared up. Another whispered, "Thank you." A journalist in the corner wrote down every word. Back home, the restaurant quietly renamed Booth 6. There was no plaque, no speech, just a small framed photo of a shadowed hand gripping a child's. Underneath it, a single line: "The strongest stand isn't always loud." But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded flag, one that had clearly seen a ceremony before, and a note. "You reminded me why we came home. I've carried this for 12 years. Now it's yours. Pass it on when it's time." And then Jordan came back. Not with cameras. Not with press. Just a quiet knock on the door while the kids were at school. Marcus opened it and stared for a second. Then smiled. "I hoped I'd see you again," he said. "I had a few people reach out," she replied. "Apparently, I'm now the face of angry women who don't let veterans get mocked." She smiled thinly. "I'll take it." They sat on the porch. No war stories. No speeches. Just coffee and spring breeze and the occasional, quiet understanding that passed without needing words. After a while, Marcus asked, "Why did you come over that day?" "You didn't know me." Jordan leaned back in the old deck chair. Thought for a long moment. "Because I know what it's like to panic in public and pray someone will just see you and not stare at you. Because I've walked out of stores crying and had people laugh behind me. And because your kids didn't look scared. They looked trained. That broke me." Marcus swallowed. His voice roughened. "I thought I failed them." "No," she said. "You taught them calm in chaos. That's not failure. That's leadership." The wind shifted. A bird landed on the railing. And for a few precious seconds, neither of them felt like ghosts. In the months that followed, Marcus didn't become a celebrity. He didn't write a book or get a podcast deal. But he did start attending the local veterans parenting group, something he'd avoided for years. He spoke sometimes. Quietly. His kids made new friends. His panic attacks didn't stop, but they changed. They lost some of their bite, some of their shame. And on the anniversary of that day, he and Jordan were invited back to that same restaurant. They didn't know what to expect. But when they arrived, a new sign stood by the door. "This is a place for every kind of courage, seen and unseen." They were seated, without being asked, at booth 6. The waitress brought over 2 menus and said, softly, "You don't owe anyone an explanation, sir. But I'm proud you're here." Then she walked away. No fanfare. Just acknowledgement. Jordan raised her glass. To surviving. Marcus raised his. To being seen. And when they clinked glasses, it wasn't celebration. It was solidarity. For every veteran still hiding in plain sight. For every kid who learns that strength isn't silence, it's standing through it. And for every stranger who chooses to say, enough, no more mockery, no more invisibility, because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about war. They're about who answers the call long after the gunfire ends.